Hi, we're gonna be using CryEngine today, and I would like to show you three different applications for the tool that you can use in your game. So this is what we're gonna be building today. One example is medium-size asset that you can use for the whiteboxing. One example is a piece of level that you can just build, and then after that just start playing in it right away. And the third one is just a proof of concept that if you're desperate enough you can build it. And so let's start. First we start with a cylinder. 8 sides is fine. I forgot one thing, that maybe for the reference you want to also create a box of a size of 2 meters. That's more or less the character size that users that the player gonna play, basically. That's more or less the human size. So this is more or less human, so the tree can be a bit bigger. So I have, I'm gonna use loop cut with control and middle mouse button with the wheel on the mouse. You can add sides like this. And now for again, to make this lower part of those cuts that you're gonna use for the leaves. One more thing, I have prepared a different material that I can use for to remove the grid that we have on the tree that can look a bit noisy. So with Alt-M you can enable material editor, and let's stock it. And I go to materials. I prepare this default multi-material for the asset I'm going to build today, and I assign this material to this tree. The first one is also a grid, but it's a bit different grid. It's less noisy. I'll show one more thing with assigning materials just in a second, because that's a quite interesting feature. But let's get back to the designer. I'm using a loop tool to select all the edges around the cylinder and just scale them up. Maybe something like this. Now, since I've done it, it makes sense to go here and collapse the top, so we have nice tip of on the tree. And maybe now I can continue modeling the tree. So there's our tree. Now, have you seen, as you've seen on the on over there, where was it? The tree has different materials. You can do this as well here. And that's actually quite cool feature. That for those green elements, we can go here and for just those faces assign submaterial. I already prepared green submaterial, and I'm just gonna click assign. Boom, it's green. For other faces, I will just assign. Do I have brown? Yes, I have the brown. Also, it looks quite flat. Maybe some people like it, but it's, of course, it's just a white box asset, so maybe it doesn't make sense to focus on this stuff. But just because it's nice, then you can create smoothing groups for those leaves. And also on the trunk, go to groups, smoothing group, add smoothing group. I think it's already added to the smoothing group, but if it's not, then add polygons. Basically, you can add any polygon to the smoothing group now, just selecting the smoothing group one polygon and assign it. But you're gonna do the same for the bottom part. Add smoothing group, and there we go. We have a tree. Now this tree is still a designer object, and it yeah, you can leave it like it is. But if you're working on a level design and you want to just populate this tree, the best solution is, of course, to first select the tree and export it as a CGF, which you can do right away. And just make this window bigger. Design and demo, assets, objects. I already exported this before, but I'll just export it again. 3, 2, export. And now you can go to vegetation editor or press Alt V, and vegetation editor appears. What we can do now, we can add. You right click on the vegetation editor, you click add object, go to tree 2, open, there you go, there's your tree. And let's set up the tree, size variation, let's say 0.4, random rotation, I like to turn normals to some degree, use string color no, and let's enable where's the density here, something like 10. So now we're gonna paint with this tree. And there you go. There's already something going on. To make it more variant, go to the terrain editor, Alt T on the keyboard by default, sculpt, let's say raise lower, enable noise, something like this. Oh, that's maybe too much. Hardness maybe a bit less, height, oh, something like that. Okay, that's still a lot, but you get the idea. So this is how you can create quickly some assets that can already serve as a props that you can use for populating the map. Now I would like to show you the another example is the cup. You're doing this by let's go to CRYENGINE. Let's create a cylinder. This time let's make it 10 the size. Enable grid snapping, because you will see why I have enabled the grid snapping. Because now when I actually create the cylinder, two of my sides are already facing exactly one direction. That's what I want. So again, this texture is good for laying out the level and seeing the sizes. As you see here, they fit exactly the units of the universe. But let's also assign a different material to it. Just for now, we're gonna use maybe this one. Or maybe that's a bit too bright. Let's make it a little bit darker. That's a good start. Again, go back to designer. You can already disable the snap to grid. Where's this height? A little bigger. And now again, going to loop cut with Control and mouse wheel. We have this function here. You can add sides, loop selection, make it slightly bigger. This loop selection slightly smaller. Let's move the upper part a little bit up. Something like this. Now I would need to have more sides. Let's loop select. Let's loop select. Now let's go to bevel and add something like that. We don't need more. Or maybe actually we do. So let's select again, loop, bevel, something like that. We don't need more sides. Something like that seems fine. Yeah, and we can start making the cups holder. Only thing is that this guy should be a little bit higher, slightly outwards. Yeah, maybe something like this. So we can go now and select polygon. Let's say those two. Tools, extrude multiple. We can do something like this. I'm going to select the edges, move them back in the wall space. We can remove those two faces. Now let's recreate that geometry here. All right, so we have the holding piece of the cup, and now I just want to add one more cut and move it outside again, something like this. I did forget to create the inner part of the cup before, but that's okay. Let's extrude a bit. We left one loop. We left one loop of the vertices here. That's an option that you can enable or disable in the settings of the tool. And in certain some cases it can be very useful. I will show this in the piece of the level kind of template example. Now I would like to go to offset, bridge edge loops also are needed in this situation, because we want to have this row of edges, this ring of edges, because maybe we want to make it rounder later. But anyway, let's go down. Now we can add this, select this internal polygon. We're not gonna focus on this because it makes no sense, but oh, I want to disable terrain. And now let's go to view and render mode wireframe. Move this somewhere here. It doesn't have to be super precise. And enable terrain, enable solid view. So now I would like to add more loop cuts, just so it's a little bit more accurate, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Not for this example. It's just a proof of concept that if you really want, you can create assets that are either for maybe a cartoony game or a little bit more detailed than just simple boxes. I personally usually, when I create a level, when I do level design, I want my level to already resemble a little bit of the final look, because it makes me it's easier for me to feel in the mood of the game, of the level that I'm working on. So in that case, yeah, I just go a little bit beyond that. So now we have this cup, and let's just tweak this element a bit more, so it's a little bit more subtle. Like this, like that, and scale them on the y-axis. Maybe this a little bit more. Okay, so this is the object, and now because I can, I'm gonna enable subdivision, which makes it nice and round. The only thing is, as you've seen, you need a sharp edge here on the bottom, probably on the internal side as well. Let's do it somewhere here, and maybe over there. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit similar to well-known IKEA design, and that's okay. And there you go, we have our cup. Just as a showcase of organic modeling. Of course, you can create anything else. This tool is specifically designed to help with the architectural design. So it's obvious that it can do well very well the modeling for the architecture, but not so much for organics. But just as proof of concept, you can do this, and it will work. So let's just assign some different material. I had nice, maybe this. Yeah, nice and shiny. So let's move to the third object, which is actually the most important on in this video, the level design approach. So let's create a box like that, and now let's say I want to create a second platform or here. Now if you noticed, I created this separately. but it's still one asset. This is when you have the seamless edit enabled. That's a good thing in some cases when you want to do the speed level design. So you can continue within the same object basically on, and it will just create one mesh. And the benefit of it is that, for example, now I can create a rectangle line. Let's say I want to create a bridge. So I create this rectangle here, and I go to extrude this all the way to the end, and it stops at this geometry, and it physically connects with this geometry. If I enable triangulation and display triangulation, you can see that it's connected. This is part of the mesh. This is not just a geometry that's stuck on top of it, but it's really a geometry. So the same thing as before. The cool thing is also that with tools like extrude, when I move down, by the way, here you see I move up, I have this edge created. I don't want this. I want actually now to be able to move freely my geometry like this and without additional geometry. So I move all the way down, and it stops there. It detects this edge, and theoretically it's not rocket science, of course, but now you can actually remove those edges. Those are now part of the it's just one polygon, at least for the user. So this is the very nice way of dealing with topologies like that, and I'm not dealing with the topologies in this situation. So for example, yes, I want to maybe now actually it's a good idea to create the offset, and I don't necessarily need to have those edges connected like I did for the cup. So I will disable the create edges, and I will just create something like this. And now I can just easily go for the whole mesh and create, let's say, a wall or some kind of a fence. That's quite easy to do. Actually, since I'm here, I can do some interesting, let's say, something like this, and let's just say that I want to create pillars under the bridge. So I would use again offset, make it maybe something like this size, and I want to have the same sizes all the way up to the end. So something like this. Okay, maybe that's not very precise. Let's do it like that. I want to remove this loop. I'll just press delete on the keyboard. The edges are gone. Now I want to move this geometry right, because I want this to be a little more centered. The interesting part of making level design with the designer is that it really allows you to create multiple, to experiment basically, and that's the great part. Actually, I can make without again. Yes, because it remembered the previous move already when I undid. So Crytek Designer encourages to experiment a lot, and that's a great thing, actually. And why not? Let's say I want to also do, no, I'll just create an edge from here to here, because I can. Escape, and again, we that. Out, 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 left mouse button. That will basically create the same type of geometry as we did before. So for example, now I can extrude it to the other side of this geometry here. So I have this kind of shape. And yes, of course, you can do this every single time, move it left and right, and until you meet the edge, and it will disappear. But you can again repeat it with the else left mouse button. And this way we have already something. Now, let's just say that I want to create some more interesting elements here. And I don't like this this setup at all. So I will just go here, for example, and use slice in the y-axis and move it here because I want to, and divide. Actually, no, not divide. I would take away the back. Perfect. And now we have this completely cut out, leaving us with nice planar geometry. So now again, I can continue with my design. I can also use the box like I before. I created a rectangle here, and then I extrude this rectangle. I can now just create a box and do the same here, and it creates a platform. Again, I can just it already created. Remove the edge. We can in the settings we can disable automatic edge removal, but it's very useful, especially when you're working on this kind of experimental workflow. So I want to actually create now a different piece of geometry. So I get out and I create similar shapes to you've seen before. Now extrude. I want to leave the edge loops. Just like that. Maybe even more. Or maybe you can just start from here, like that, and move one on this side, and then we'll quit snapping, something like 8. Now let's create a wall behind those pillars. And in order to do that, I want to actually make it a bit shorter, something like that. Oh no, actually, for now, let's make it like this to see it better. Extrude, leave edge loops like this. Or actually, we can make already the whole room that may exist over there. So this way, we can have a place that we can go into. Something like this. And from this perspective, it's it looks like a wall with no entrance. The entrance we're gonna make now. But first, I would like to actually create a ceiling. In order to do that, I'll just create one line here, so I can extrude it actually. The highlight indicates that it's the line is exactly on the is flat on the z-axis. So now I can actually go and extrude even farther like this. Now leave edge loops. I don't know, something like that. higher. And now let's create, I don't know, something like indent on the ceiling, something like that. Extrude all the way to the back, and here we can continue with our level. But before I'm gonna do this, maybe I would like to create this platform that I've shown you before on the example project. Now let's create a rectangle. It's gonna be easier to align the sides. So now I would like to create like a beveled edge. So let's say I create something like this. It's just quick and dirty. Normally I would create like guidance lines, guidelines, and then I would continue from there. But it's good enough for this showcase. I would remove those because I don't need them anymore. Remove it, and now I would use offset tool with or without bridged edge. So maybe actually the first one I would extrude more, so it's kind of high like that, and then I would just create something like this. Of course, it maybe makes some sense, but it doesn't matter. Spaces, extrude multiple, extrude multiple. Well, I could do the snapping, so that would be all equal, but it doesn't really matter now. So yeah, now what I would like to do is to create a platform that connects, or maybe first before I do this, maybe I can create something different. Let's say I want to create stairs, something like that. For some reason we have an edge over there. Now we have the platform, it goes all the way to the wall, and here, for example, I can create again a rectangle starting from the bottom. It snaps nicely, something like this. Now I would use offset to create something more like that. Here I would like those lines to go all the way down, so I would actually create polyline like this. One more over here. Remove this edge because I don't need this. Extrude this outwards and this backwards. All the way, not maybe all the way, but something like here. And that's maybe not enough. I mean, the corridor is quite narrow. We can make it a bit wider, but essentially this can go forever. It's very easy to create rooms, to create walls, to create different geometries. Now I can do something like this, for example, and now tools extrude to make the room bigger, something like that. And now, for example, I would create, I don't know, disk. Oh, that's not enough. Let's create something more. And now extrude all the way. And just maybe make it narrower. So we have a window. And this can go forever. Interesting thing about Crytek Designer is also that we can use those submaterials to assign to different faces without identifying in them initially. And that helps a lot when, especially for the level design, we can create multi-material that has a lot of submaterials that even covers most of the objects, because the object still has to use one material, but faces of this object can use different submaterials. So we can assign. We don't have to assign it like this, but we can. Now I go for designer and I go polygon, and let's just say I want those elements here to, or those stairs, to glow. And I already prepared some material for that. This object is glowing. I can make it glow even brighter. And even farther here, and loop, 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 and loop, and loop, and we can assign even something like that. And now let's just say I want everything else to be concrete. So let's also select those faces. And now in Crytek Designer, in the designer, I would go for invert, material editor. The last one I already prepared, concrete, is a texture from Megascans. Very good, huge library of awesome materials and textures. For this purpose, I just use different default texture. I haven't done anything to it. It's just tileable concrete. I would like to create maybe one more light. Not light, but a piece of geometry like that. Something like that. And just because I like this, because then it gives you nice reflection. User can create basically any kind of geometry. Of course, the more organic it goes, the more the tool gives the flexibility. It's specifically designed for level design, for quick architectural creation, but it does go a little bit beyond that and allow user to create all those different shapes. And this way, I believe that the user really have the flexibility that he can use. He doesn't have to go to any other tool and create those even simple objects. He can create them on site, export them quickly to CGF, and reuse them if he needs to. All right, so I believe that will be enough for this webinar, and thank you for watching.
Achieved with CRYENGINE.